Good day to Miss. I'm Chun and I'm going to present about the introduction to getElementById. So first, the getElementById method returns the element that has the ID attribute with the specified value. This method is one of the most common methods in the HTML and is used almost every time you want to manipulate or get info from an element on your document. So, how does it work together with the HTML? First, the HTML code often has an ID attribute. Example like ID equal to root. The ID is to identify a HTML element within the document. By rules, the root ID is unique within the document because the other element cannot have this root ID. Next, the ID is also a case-sensitive attribute. For example, the root and another root which is R in capital letter are totally different ID when it is in HTML. So, in an easy way, if you want to select the element by its ID, you have to use the getElementById method in the document. Other than that, is let element equal to document.getElementById. Example like this code here. In this syntax, the ID represents the ID of an element that you want to select. The getElementById returns to an object which describes the DOM element object within the specified ID. Moreover, it will return null if there are no elements with that ID exists. So, as I mentioned earlier, the ID is unique within a document. However, HTML is a forgiving language. If a document has more than one element with the same ID, the getElementById method returns to the first one that it encounters. So, as example of getElementById in HTML. So, this is the code of the getElementById in HTML, and I run it in Chrome. So, it should be like this. When we click the testing button, it will change the text in the paragraph. Example like this. So it will disappear this word at the screen. So that's all about my presentation of introduction to getElementById. Thank you, Miss.
Good day, Miss. My name is Seong. Today I will be presenting the getElementById using the sample one. So this is the movie forms. So we will use the span element ID here, ID to display the informations or to check the validations. So we will start within the scripts. So this is the function getAuthor. It will be run when the user enters the buy now buttons. So this is the validations, declarations. This is the data retrieved from the forms. So here to use the getElementById to check the validations. So once the user does not enter any data inside it, you use the getElementById that within the ID will be displayed out the words. Please enter the usernames. So once the user already input correct valid names, and the getElementById does not display out any things, and the checking validation of name will be updated to once. So this program is used to get the price and the name of the movies. So if the price is empty, that means the user does not select a movie. So the movie price ID will be displayed out the pre-select movie. So once the user has selected it, then it will be just not showing out any words, and the king will be updated. So next is the adult quantity. So once the adult quantity does not being filled in or not a number being input or entered by user, it will be calling beside it will be please enter a quantity using within the adult quantity ID. Else already enter the quantity, it will display nothing, and the address checking will be updated. So same as the dates and the time. So here is the once all information does not fill in, that means the validation is not passed. So we pop up the alert message to call the user fill out the form correctly. So here is the last part of it. So once the information being passed, the validations being entered correctly, we will use the getElementById that below the information ID will be displayed out the receipts and the necessary details. So once the total X price is not equal to 0, it will be outputs the add-ons detail. That means when user choose add-ons, there will be displayed add-ons detail within the total X ID. And the last part is using the grand total ID to pass the grand total of the elements. So before I end my presentations, I'll be showing out. So this is when the user does not enter any data, pop up the alert message to call us to inputs correctly. So here is the getElementById to give the notice to user to enter correctly. So once I already entered correctly data, the getElementById will be display nothing. That means already passed the validations. So here is the red color words, that means you haven't passed the valids. That means still invalids. So I'll be enter all. Just times add-ons is options. So and the check is also options. So will be after enter the buy now, you get a receipts within the page. So once I upgrade within buy a new ticket within a shell and add-ons, so the outputs together add-ons details. That's all for me. Thank you.
Hi Miss, my name is Jian, and today I want to explain another example of getElementById. So for my part is the Pizza King HTML. So for the first, I create a form and I name it the form as user_form. So in the form, there are name, phone, pizza, quantity, and the delivery. So for the name and the phone, I create the placeholder and also create the spend ID. So for the name is arrow1 and the phone is arrow2. So for this ID, later I will use in the getElementById. So for the pizza also, I also create the spend ID as pizza_arrow. And for the pizza detail, I using the radio button. So for the next is the quantity. So quantity is quantity_arrow and the delivery is delivery_arrow. So for the next is the order now button. So I using the onClick method and I name it as pizza_data, then column, and the ID is receipt. So now I want go to the getElementById part, the JavaScript part. So for the first, I create a function and I name it as pizza_data. So next, I count out the variable. So for this, name check, phone check, pizza check, quantity check, and the delivery check, I put it as equal to 0 because later I will do some checking. Okay, so this one is the detail. So next, I will do the getElementById. So let's say the user enter the name is empty, empty or not equal to the name check. So for the name check, I create a requirement. So the user must enter the alphabet with no space. So if the user enter the wrong detail, then it will come out the invalid message. else it will count the valid, and I will do the name check equal to 1. So for the next is the phone number. So phone number is the same. If the user enter the phone number is empty or not equal to the phone check. So for the phone check, I also do the requirement. So the user must enter the 10-digit number with no space. So if the user enter the wrong input, then it will count out the invalid message. Else, it will count out the valid. So next, I also will do the phone check equal to 1. Okay. So in the getElementById, I put as arrow 2. This one is from the ID, span ID. Okay, so next is the pizza code. So pizza code I do in the switch case. So for the case P1, P2, P3, P4 and P5, I take from the value this one. So this is the switch case, and then I will count the name and the price. So go back to the getElementById. So let's say the user is not enter any pizza code or any number, then it will count out the invalid message. Please choose a pizza. So else, I will do the pizza check equal to 1. So next is the quantity. So if the user is not enter the empty quantity or not enter a number, then it also will count the invalid message. Please enter the quantity. So else, I will do the quantity underscore check equal to 1. So for next is the delivery. So delivery, the user can choose whether they want delivery or not. So I also using the switch case. So if the user choose yes, then the delivery fee is 5. If the user choose no, then the delivery price is 0. So as the same. So if the user is not enter any input for the delivery, so it will come out this message. Please choose the delivery. So else, I will do the delivery check equal to 1. Okay. So after that, I will calculate the total price. So the total price is quantity multiplied with the combo price and plus the delivery price. So next, I will do the checking. So let's say if the user enter the correct name, food, pizza, quantity, and the delivery, then it will count out the receipt output. Else, it will count the alert message. Please fill out the detail. Thank you. Okay. So now I want to run the program. So this one is the HTML form. So let's say I didn't enter any detail and I press the order now. So it will count out the alert message. Then I click OK. Then it will count out the invalid message. Okay. So let's say I enter a wrong input. So name, I enter a number and I give you a space. And the phone, I enter a alphabet. And I simply choose a pizza, quantity, and the delivery. So it will also count out the alert message because I enter the wrong input for the name and the phone number. Okay. So now I want to enter the correct detail. So let's say name, I enter my name and the phone number. And pizza, let's say quantity is 1 and delivery is yes. Then I press order now. So it will count out the valid message. Means that the user is enter the correct detail. Okay. So this one is the receipt. and the total price is displayed. So yeah, so that's all for me. So thank you.
Good day to all, my name is Zheng and I will explain one of the samples that using getElementById. So my sample is Foundation CGPA Calculator. This form is to let the student fill out their information, and I have put the spend ID beside each of the input box. After the student fill out their information, they have to click the Calculate CGPA button to do calculation, and it will display out all the information and the CGPA of the student. Now I go to the JavaScript part. The first row and the second row is the variable declaration. The second row is the checking variable and all equal to 0. This is the data derivation. After that, we do the checking part. So if the student they did not fill out anything, or they fill out is not a number inside the input box, it will display out please enter student ID beside the input box. This method is using the getElementById. Else the student is fill out the correct information, the checking variable will equal to 1. So the name and the program is same, but they did not have the is not a number because they are a string variable. Now we go to the GPA part. Okay, GPA is a bit different because GPA has a range 0 until 4. So if the student is input more than 4, is fill out not a number, it will display out please key in a valid GPA beside the input box. Else the student is fill out the GPA from 0 until 4, the checking variable will equal to 1. So the second GPA and the third GPA is the same method with the first one. After that, we go to the switch case. So this switch case is to determine the program name. After that, we use the if-else statement to do the checking. So if the checking variable equal to 1 and using the and symbol. So if the ID checking variable equal to 1, name checking variable equal to 1, program and the GPA from first sem until third sem is equal to 1, you will go to the function of calculate and passing the ID, name, program name and the 3 sem GPA to the function. Else it will come out the error message, please fill up all the detail. Okay, now we go to the final function. So inside the calculate function, first we declare a variable called CGPA equal to 0. After that, it will do the calculation. So the CGPA equal to first sem GPA, second sem GPA and the third sem GPA, it will do the addition and it will divide by 3 because it has 3 sem only. After that, it will display out all the information and CGPA of student by using the getElementById. Now we go to the sample output to demo one time. So first, if the student they did not fill out anything, they direct click a calculate CGPA button, it will come out the error message, please fill out all the detail. Okay, now I fill up all the detail at here. For example, this is my student ID, my student name. I am in IT, so my first sem GPA is 3.8, second sem is 4, third sem also 4. Then I click this calculate CGPA. Now all the information is filled out and it will come to the part from here, at here. Okay, so I click this calculate CGPA and it will display out all the information at here. So this is my information and it will calculate out the total CGPA below the button. So that's all for me. Thank you for watching.